Well, good morning and welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I am your host, Frank Acom. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio, as always. I'm so glad you joined us this morning. We have a lot to cover, obviously. In the Trump news cycle, we are going to talk about all the issues of the day. First, let's go to some viewer comments. Also, I do want to remind you, coming up in the 7 o'clock hour, Jen Mullen will be our guest. She's running for Steuben County Legislator in the district that encompasses Caton, Hornby, and the town of Corning. There's a primary challenge there, so we're going to be talking to both candidates. But Jen Mullen is first up, and that is today in the 7 o'clock hour. Okay, comments from viewers. Good morning, Frank. Well, good morning. This is Rick. Why is the state setting aside millions of dollars for a no cell phone program? Why should that cost one nickel? Rick, we're on the same page here. School districts lay out the program and include it in a newsletter that more than likely sent out by mail via website or both. It's easy. No phone during school or pay the consequence. Easy. Doesn't cost a nickel. They didn't have cell phones when we went to school and our kids went to school. If you needed to get a hold of home, you went to the school and they called for you. Leave the phones home and work hard in the books. This doesn't seem like a tough one to get after. I agree, Rick. So $13.5 million in the budget, which, by the way, the budget is still not passed. I know that Governor Hochul is taking her victory lap. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on. But $13.5 million set aside to ban cell phones, bell to bell, in schools. In New York City, saying it's not enough. They were demanding more than 13.5. Now, I agree. It seems as simple as sending out an email, a text. I know when the weather's bad and they have to cancel school, they can text, they can email, they have automated programs that can call. So why not do the same and say no more cell phones? Here is the punishment if a student is caught with a cell phone. So $13.5 million. And then Rick, a little bit later on, commented, haha, day 101, Waltz is out. We're going to talk about that in a moment. UN representative, no way. Hegseth is next. No national security advisor. Pakistan and India saber-rattling, both nuclear armed. Gaza hostages. Our friends in Israel aren't letting us aid into Gaza, deepening a humanitarian disaster. Ukraine-Russia conflict. Waltz obviously shouldn't have been in that role to start with. That goes for a lot of the current cabinet. That's Rick. We're going to talk about Waltz being out here in just a little bit. And then we have a comment here starting off the program with Mark. Mark says, good morning, Frank. Well, good morning, Mark. I think Marco Rubio has his job cut out for him as Mike Waltz is stepping down and Marco is going to do both jobs. Oh, more than both jobs, Mark. I was shocked to hear because I started thinking, but it seems like Rubio is in charge of a lot. Marco Rubio now has 4 different roles in the Trump administration. So let's see if I have the exact list. We know he's in charge as Secretary of State, now National Security Advisor, U.S. Archivist, that one you may not have known, and head of USAID. He's doing that all at once. So when I joke that Pam Bondi must be exhausted, Marco Rubio might think that's a vacation. Yes, 4 jobs. We're going to talk about that coming up in a little bit. First, breaking early this morning, mere moments ago, Donald Trump, he actually announced it late last night, but the news broke this morning. He announced plans to designate May the 8th as World War II Victory Day in the United States, which coincides with the Victory in Europe Day, has been celebrated in most of Europe since the Germans surrendered in 1945. Trump acknowledged in a Truth Social that, quote, many of our allies and friends already celebrate on May 8th, but said America should join in because, quote, we did more than any other country by far in producing a victorious result. Now, on May 7th, 1945, the Germans surrendered to the Allied forces and agreed to cease all operations the next day. World War II officially ended later in the year on September 2nd, when the Japanese signed an instrument of surrender, though Japan waved the white flag on August 14th, about a week after the United States dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The United States does not have any public holidays commemorating World War II specifically, but there have been remembrance ceremonies in May, August, and September across the country for decades. Now, former President Harry Truman, who was in office during the end of World War II, issued a proclamation in August of 1946 declaring August 14th as Victory over Japan Day. I'm not going to read Truman's proclamation. We don't need to know all that. But in the same post, Trump said, "We won both wars. Nobody was close to us in terms of strength, bravery, or military brilliance. But we never celebrate anything. That's because we don't have leaders anymore that know how to do so. We are going to start celebrating our victories again." And I like that line. We are going to start celebrating our victories again. So May the 8th, mark your calendar, is going to be Victory Day for World War II. And that was posted last night. Another very big breaking story coming in late last night, early this morning. Long awaited, some would argue, that President Donald Trump signed an executive order late last night terminating federal funding for National Public Radio, NPR, and the Public Broadcasting Service, PBS. Now, I will warn you, if you are a Trump supporter and you're watching this, you will start seeing a lot of headlines about the end or the death of Big Bird. They will start trying to tug at your heartstrings about the programming that will be lost. It's nonsense. They do not need the federal dollars. What that is used for, and I would recommend anybody do this. If you see an NPR station or a PBS station, see if you can visit. They have the best technology, the technology that for-profit stations could never afford. NPR and PBS have long been targeted for cuts by conservatives. Both receive partial funding through the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which the president argued is unnecessary in the current media environment. Trump wrote in his order, "Government funding of news media in this environment is not only outdated and unnecessary, but corrosive to the appearance of journalistic independence." And now, any conservative would argue that NPR and PBS are extremely, extremely biased. And I don't even think the left can deny it. It's almost a stereotype that the left put on. It is, I mean, people talk about it a lot, that the left put on NPR when they're driving around to get their news because it is so biased. I remember when the hearings for Brett Kavanaugh were going on, and I had to travel somewhere, and I don't remember the reason, not that that's important, and I wanted to hear what was happening in the hearings, so I was flipping around the radio station, and the only one that had any wall-to-wall coverage, so to speak, was NPR, and to hear their take on the hearings was startling, how far left and radical it was. Trump said the CPB board shall cease direct funding to NPR and PBS, consistent with my administration's policy to ensure that federal funding does not support biased and partisan news coverage. The CPB board shall cancel existing direct funding to the maximum extent allowed by law and shall decline to provide future funding. He further directed the CPB to end indirect funding to NPR and PBS, including by ensuring that licensees and permittees of public radio and television stations, as well as any other recipient of CPB funds, do not use federal funds for NPR and PBS. The president gave the CPB until June the 30th to meet this directive. Again, there is going to be a lot of coverage of this, trying to suggest that it is the end of the world, essentially. That it's the worst thing that could happen. Big Bird's going to die. Mr. Rogers is rolling over in his grave, these type of things. But if you look at their business model, now I know they depend on viewers like you, right, or listeners like you. But if you look at their programming model, it wouldn't be a successful for-profit business if it wasn't the way it was done. So it'd be, to kind of put it into comparison, if you work in the media, if you were to open a hot dog cart, right? And you're successful, you're doing good, you're doing all that you're supposed to do, and then the government says, here's money for a hot dog cart right next to you, where it's going to be cheaper because we're paying for it. It's not as good of a product, but we're basically giving it away and running the for-profits out of business. NPR and PBS both have diverse revenue streams, including major foundation grants, advertising, and voluntary viewer and listener donation, meaning that neither is likely to cease operation if they lose federal funds. And they will not. They're going to say they are. They're going to claim they are. But there's even been kind of undercover investigations where people inside the organization said that they don't need the federal funds. It's kind of a bonus, if you will. The CPB is set to receive $535 million in congressionally appropriated funds annually to distribute to public broadcasters in 2025 and 2026. $535 million. PBS and its member stations receive about 15% of their revenues from the CPB, while NPR stations get 10% of their funds from the corporation, according to NPR. NPR itself only receives 1% directly from CPB. This is not the first time that Trump and other conservatives have called for the end of government funding for NPR and PBS. But in his late night order, the president argued that Americans have the right to expect that if their tax dollars fund public broadcasting at all, they fund only fair, accurate, unbiased, and nonpartisan news coverage. And I would make the case to anyone, argue that PBS and NPR are not biased. Argue that they deserve federal funding because of their fair coverage. I would love to hear that argument. He continued, no media outlet has a constitutional right to taxpayer subsidies, and the government is entitled to determine which categories of activities to subsidize. A White House fact sheet on the order suggested that the left-leaning network's output acts as a, quote, significant in-kind contribution to the Democrat Party and its political causes, therefore violating the CPB's legal mandate to be non-political in nature. Quote, the CPB fails to abide by these principles to the extent it subsidizes NPR and PBS, which viewpoints NPR and PBS promotes does not matter. What does matter is that neither entity presents a fair, accurate, or unbiased portrayal of current events to taxpayer citizens. In addition to eliminating CPB payments to NPR and PBS, Trump ordered all federal agencies to identify and terminate any taxpayer money going to the public broadcasters. Trump also tasked Robert F. Kennedy Jr. with determining whether PBS and NPR are complying with the statutory mandate that, quote, no person shall be subjected to discrimination in employment on the grounds of race, color, religion, national origin, or sex. In the event of finding of noncompliance, the Secretary of Health and Human Services shall take appropriate corrective action. So big news, and this is an example of Trump again, doing what others have not been able to do before, because this has been a rallying cry for a very long time. I remember it was a major issue during the Obama administration and during the Tea Party movement. People were demanding the NPR and PBS lose their federal funding. Nothing really came from it. I want to say it was Project Veritas or someone like that did that undercover investigation into these outlets and saw their dirty deeds firsthand. So again, breaking news. We are going to talk about the media a little bit more, not a ton more, but a few things I think that are worth mentioning. We've got a lot of local issues as well, running just a little bit late. But your thoughts, NPR, PBS, federal funding going away. When we come back, a couple other Trump updates, and then we're going to dive into local issues, then back into Trump and the Democrat Party as well. Also, I need your secret. I need your Kentucky Derby pick. Who do you like in the Derby this Saturday? Tomorrow? Again, got any hot tips for me? Because other than knowing that horse journalism is the favorite, not aware of much more. I know Bob Baffer has a horse in again this year. But that's really all I know. So I'd love to hear your tips. I see some comments coming in. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are back, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. So glad that you've joined us this morning. Let's go to some viewer comments. Ken writes in, did you see Kamala's 15-minute return to the limelight? I did. I hate to use this word, but in Gen Z terms for it, it would be cringe. Yes. At least Kamala got it right with her analogy of the elephants protecting the most vulnerable. Did no one tell her, though, that the elephant is the Republican animal symbol? Thank you, Ken. Yes, a very good point. We mentioned it quickly yesterday on the program. But if you go to Drudge Report, and I don't want to dive into my thoughts on Drudge Report anymore, but they're not in any way, shape, or form pro-Trump. They had an article today, and we may get a chance to bring it up later on in the program, that suggests that it looks like Kamala's running again with that speech. Now, most people speculate that she's going to run for governor of California, but this piece makes it sound as if because of that speech, she may be thinking of another run in 2028. Now, I thought the speech was pretty typical Kamala Harris. Not a lot of substance, kind of like Ken said, and I'm with you, Ken. I don't like to use the word either, but it does fit in this scenario. It was very cringe. So, yes, thank you. Comment from a different viewer. Good morning, Frank. Well, good morning. It occurs to me the Democrats have achieved their socialist communist goals. Okay. The field of potential candidates is a bunch of nameless, interchangeable cogs in the machine. Isn't that what Trotsky and Lenin were pushing back in 1917? That's a very good point. Yes, it is a kind of nameless, faceless. The favorite, weirdly enough, I shouldn't say weirdly, it's for obvious reasons, but is Kamala Harris. The reason she's the favorite is because she spent $2 billion in, 109 days, 100 and some days, to get her name out there. So it should come as no surprise that she's the favorite just because of name recognition. But otherwise, you have what? Tim Walz, J.B. Pritzker, Gavin Newsom, Josh Shapiro, AOC. Those are the names. At one time, Gretchen Whitmer. Not any longer. She had the audacity to meet with Trump to try to do what's right for her constituents in Michigan. And that is frowned upon because she is no longer the face of the resistance, according to CNN. But I continue. Comment from a different viewer. Big Bird is going broke because the count didn't count right. And also the Cookie Monster ate up the profits. I like it. Thank you very much. So a federal judge yesterday blocked the Trump administration from using that 18th century law to deport suspected Venezuelan gang members in South Texas, ruling that the president's invocation of the Alien Enemies Act is unlawful. In the most forceful ruling against the administration's use of the 1798 law to date, District Judge Fernando Rodriguez, an appointee of Trump, but that is not that surprising if you look at the history of appointed judges by Republicans, unfortunately, very often kind of a turncoat, if you will. So it does not come as a surprise. But he issued a permanent injunction against the application of the statute on migrants detained in the Southern District of Texas. The Trump administration's utilization of the Alien Enemies Act to swiftly deport alleged members of Tren de Aragua, TDA, to El Salvador's mega prison exceeded the scope of the wartime law, the judge ruled in a 36-page opinion. Rodriguez wrote, the president's invocation of the AEA through the proclamation exceeds the scope of the statute and as a result is unlawful. The judge ruled that TDA activities in the U.S., which boomed under the Biden administration, fell short of amounting to an invasion or predatory incursion, as Trump proclaimed when he invoked the act, allowing the president to unilaterally define the conditions when he may invoke the AEA, and then similarly, I always have trouble with that word, moving along, declare that those conditions exist, would remove all limitations to the executive branch's authority under the AEA and would strip the courts of their traditional role of interpreting congressional statutes to determine whether government officials have exceeded the statute's scope. The law does not support such a position. Now, Trump's use of the Alien Enemies Act has been litigated in several courts, including the Supreme Court, but Rodriguez is the first judge to permanently block on the merit. The White House slammed the ruling and said it believes Trump will ultimately prevail in his effort to rapidly deport Venezuelan gang members. White House spokesman Kush Desai said the Southern District of Texas's ruling is undoubtedly shocking to the over 77 million Americans who gave President Trump a decisive Election Day mandate to enforce our immigration law and deport terrorist illegal aliens. And yet time and again we see federal courts try to stop the president from exercising his lawful authority to protect the American people. The Trump administration is committed to unapologetically using every lever of power endowed to the executive branch by the Constitution and Congress to deliver on this mandate. And we are confident that we will ultimately prevail for the American people. Now, Chris Van Hollen weighed in on this. We're going to get to that in just a moment, but I realize we're running a little late. Keep those waves, keep those comments coming in. We're having a blast already here on Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. And we are back, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio on Market Street reporting. Comment from Ken. Ever since they closed OTB locations, and the closest to us being in Binghamton, I haven't really followed the Derby. If there is a horse named Journalism, I would stay away from betting it to win. I fear that the jockey will be whipping a dead horse. Thank you very much. There are some locations, they have them in some bars and different venues like that, like Tioga Downs and the like, of course. And there's apps, and of course, as you would be. But there is indeed a horse named Journalism. And in the past, I would have read or posted all the names on the screen, but I've got to be honest, some of these I have no idea how to say. So I'm going to skip that. I will say American Promise, based on just name, is nice. American Promise, right? Okay. But yes, Journalism is indeed not only a horse in the Derby, but also the favorite. Okay. Senator Chris Van Hollen, who traveled to El Salvador on taxpayers' dime to show his support for Garcia, who, as each day unfolds, we learn more and more about his alleged ties to MS-13. We learn about his record of spousal abuse, et cetera, et cetera. Well, he was on CNN yesterday, and Casey Hunt said there also was a ruling today from a federal judge, a Trump-appointed judge actually, that the use of the Alien Enemies Act to deport people from Venezuela, who the administration alleges to be part of a gang, is not allowed. What was your reaction to that? A biased question and the final question, a biased statement, and the final question is, what's your reaction? Van Hollen says it's a total abuse of the Alien Enemies Act to claim that what we're experiencing here in this country is an invasion, like from a foreign government. This was a judge who just looked at the facts and said, no, you can't do that. Look, the Trump administration is trying to dredge up these old laws and misapply them across the board. I mean, they've also done the same thing in these cases where they're detaining students for their speech. It's not a question of whether you like their speech or don't like their speech. They have a right to free speech. And Rubio has dredged up the McCarthy-era law, the McCarran-Walter Act, trying to claim that these students exercising their speech is somehow a threat to the U.S. foreign policy. It's clearly a ruse simply to squash the free speech rights. So no matter where you look, this administration is violating statutes and the Constitution, including, by the way, when it comes to tariffs, abusing their authority under the Emergency Economic Powers Act to do things they're not legally empowered to do. So Chris Van Hollen becoming one of the faces of the resistance. He was specifically thanked or praised by Kamala Harris in her comeback speech. Representative Dan Goldman, a Democrat from here in New York, was asked by Anderson Cooper, what's your reaction to the new CNN reporting that the White House has approached Libya and Rwanda about potentially deporting migrants with criminal records to those countries? Goldman said, it's just more of the same. It's a demonization of immigrants. There's a process. Nobody thinks that convicted criminals who do not have documentation and are not citizens should remain in this country. Nobody? Mr. Goldman? I would say some have made that argument. But there's a process that our laws have mandated that the administration has to follow. If they would like to change the laws, they're welcome to come to us here in Congress and try to change those laws. But they don't get to unilaterally change the law because they don't like how it is. And that's what they've been doing with government funding and the Impoundment Control Act. That's now what they're doing with immigration. That is what they're doing on so many different issues that is just directly flouting the law and undermining our baseline democratic system. Now, the due process is what the left keeps referring to, but I don't know if you saw Stephen Miller shaming the media's coverage when it comes to Trump's immigration policy, saying it's a sad reflection on the state of our media and many of the outlets represented in this room that you obsessively try and shill for this MS-13 terrorist when no coverage occurred in your papers about any of the Americans that were raped and tortured and murdered by the illegals that Biden was importing into our country. Most of your papers never covered the story of 12-year-old Jocelyn Nungari's brutal sexual assault and murder by 2 illegal aliens Joe Biden allowed to remain in the country. To the extent that you covered it at all, it was because President Trump forced you to cover it by highlighting it repeatedly over and over again. He had to shame you into covering it. And each and every one of you that sides over and over again with these MS-13 terrorists, to the extent that you have the financial means to do so, you all choose to live in condos or homes or houses as far away from these kind of gangbangers as you possibly can. If I offered any one of you a rent-free home with no taxes to pay in any of these gang neighborhoods, and I said your neighbors are MS-13 terrorists or Mexican mafia or Sinaloa cartel or Trade D and Grau, TDEA, I couldn't pay you to live there. But yet you, with your coverage, are trying to force innocent Americans to have these people as their neighbors. And one day their daughter may be abducted from their home and raped and murdered. I've got to say, I would love to hear your thoughts on Stephen Miller. He does not pull any punches. I know the media and the left make him kind of an evil villain as compared to a non-evil villain. An evil person. He's kind of the bad guy. But it's succinct, hard-hitting statements like that have such a major impact and really exposes the media's hypocrisy and the media's bias. And it's just, I thought he did a wonderful job. One last thing a couple last things on this. I wanted to mention that Scott Jennings, who I had mentioned yesterday, is looking at potentially running for Senate. He's on CNN. He's a conservative on CNN. Did you hear what he said to Ana Navarro? Jennings said, well, several things. Number one, the children that you mentioned were not deported. They went there with their mothers. Their mothers requested that the children come with them, so their mothers were deported because they were illegal aliens. Ana Navarro said they didn't get due process, and so they went. So there's really two choices: split the family or keep the family together. The U.S. government policy here was to let the mothers decide. The mothers decided to take the children. That's number one. On the Garcia case, effectively, what you are arguing for passionately, and what Democrats are passionately arguing for, is for the President of the United States to re-import a dangerous member of a transnational terrorist organization who has clear affiliations, and this is Jennings, with this gang that commits heinous atrocities. That is not what he was elected to do. And whether you bring him back here or not, I'm just going to explain to you the politics of this through telling you what the Speaker of the House, Hakeem Jeffries, did today, which is that he told his members, please, for the love of God, stop going to El Salvador and dying on this hill. The politics of this could not be worse for the left and worse for the Democrats, because the president knows he was elected to protect us from MS-13, and that is what they are doing. So that was Scott Jennings after Navarro interrupted. So Navarro gets into what she calls an absolute lie that Garcia is a MS-13 gang member. And that he didn't have MS-13 tattoos. That was Photoshopped. Jennings says they're not Photoshopped. So Navarro said, are you saying the MS-13 that Donald Trump claims are legitimate tattoos on this guy are true? Are you saying the Photoshop is true? That's when Scott Jennings, and this is the whole reason I bring it up. He said, are you a tattoo truther? I mean, I don't understand. Are you a tattoo truther? And then went on to say later, it's not disputed, those tattoos. Now, Abrego Garcia writes, during the Biden administration, the left and its media allies tried to erase the line between legal and illegal aliens, calling all aliens non-citizens. Now they're attempting to confuse the distinction between criminal and civil proceedings and rights regarding deportable aliens to stoke opposition to the Trump administration. In doing so, the left is using Kilmar Abrego Garcia as their poster child to demand more due process. It's time to correct this intended confusion and show just how much due process aliens receive. And this list, you can find it at Fox. It goes through the actual process that they go through. Now consider Garcia's case. He didn't follow Congress's due process by applying for a visa or refugee protection before coming to the U.S. He snuck across the border around 2011. He did not go to the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services to seek asylum within his first year in the U.S., an import and common sense time limitation Congress imposed to prevent asylum fraud. If you were really fleeing for your life, one would reasonably expect you would request protection soon after arriving here, but Garcia did not follow the due process. And without going any further, he just says Abrego Garcia's immigration case, I'm sorry, did I say this was by Abrego Garcia? I just realized it's by Laura Rise, about Abrego Garcia. My major apologies. Abrego Garcia's immigration case is not at all unique. Too many aliens ignore lawful process to come to the U.S. or to follow it once they're here. Instead, they demand process if and when they are eventually caught by ICE. The fact that the left has made this criminal gang member their poster child for due process has only opened more Americans' eyes to the complete abuse of our immigration system. That's Laura Rise. Okay, we got to take a break. What horse do you like in the Derby? That's the big question this morning. We're going to talk about Mike Waltz when we come back, so stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Frankly Speaking roof cam overlooking historic Market Street in the Gaffer District. Thank you to Boss Security and Horseheads for providing us that amazing view. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are back broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. Let's go to some viewer comments. Every time some no-name judge tries to step on Trump's authority, that judge should have his bank account reviewed. You just made a lot of people angry there, viewer. A lot of people are saying, you can't do that. You can't do that. Comment from a different viewer. Jack says maybe a Harris run will put a Republican back in as governor. I think it's a great idea for Harris to be governor. Her part will be, I'm combining these, sorry, Jack. Her part will be a great fit into the California nightmare government. Her cackling laugh and Picasso painting logic will only help the Republican cause there. Have you heard who might be a possible front runner for the Republican Party? I have not. In California, it's kind of, and I this is not said in a derogatory fashion, but it's kind of like New York. It doesn't mean that the candidate has no chance. We're not saying that at all. It's just the focus is normally on who the Democrat's going to be because that's the most likely victor. I would say in California, to your point, if Kamala runs, I would think there would be an opening for Republican because look how bad Gavin Newsom did with the wildfires. Look how bad Kamala Harris did at the national level in the presidential race. So I would say there's an opportunity, but I have not heard of any Republicans that are running, and hopefully it would be someone with name recognition because that's always the biggest hurdle. Comment from, hey, it's Bob. It's Climate Fact Friday. Good morning, Bob. Here we go. Climate Fact Friday from Bob. We all fondly remember the 6 lady astronauts who recently took a joyride in a spaceship. Yeah, we heard a lot about that, didn't we? That little rocket ride put around 300 metric tons of CO2 and other pollutants into our Earth's atmosphere. The same amount as 100 cars produce in 1 year. And what was the purpose of this little stunt? The only thing I could think of is they wanted to see the effect of space weightlessness on Botox. That's Bob's words, not mine. That's Bob here, right to Bob, not me. Thank you, Bob, for Climate Fact Friday. I don't know what the point of that ride was. Okay, Trump has now moved, if you will, Mike Waltz to UN ambassador, and Rubio is acting as the national security advisor. You heard this yesterday. Quite a shakeup. Writing on Truth Social, Trump said, "I'm pleased to announce that I will be nominating Mike Waltz to be the next United States ambassador to the United Nations. From his time in uniform on the battlefield, in Congress, and as my national security advisor, Mike Waltz has worked hard to put our nation's interests first. I know he will do the same in his new role. In the interim, Secretary of State Marco Rubio will serve as national security advisor while continuing his strong leadership at the State Department." Now, this was reported on early yesterday. There was anonymous sources saying he's out, he's done. So it was only a matter of time. Now, responding to the news, Waltz wrote on Twitter, "I'm deeply honored to continue my service to President Trump and our great nation." There was a lot of questions of whether or not, because of Signalgate, remember, it was under his watch that far left journalist from the Atlantic, Jeffrey Goldberg, was allowed on that Signal app. So that raised a lot of red flags about leakers and the like in the administration. It made a lot of people nervous. Many people, anonymous sources, so take it with a grain of salt, saying that Trump was concerned that Waltz even had Goldberg's number. Now, it does say here, and many are reporting on this, that far-right influencer Laura Loomer did not like Waltz either. So maybe pushing for his ouster, depending on what outlet you go to. They're trying to make it sound like she's some type of kingmaker or power broker. I don't think that's the case. I think they try to overhype that scenario. But Mike Waltz out as the national security advisor, now the UN ambassador. That puts Marco Rubio in charge of 4 different roles. He is now Marco Rubio, a man who him and Trump didn't always see eye to eye in the past, which is kind of interesting. Marco Rubio is now serving as Secretary of State, National Security Advisor, U.S. Archivist, and head of USAID, all at the same time. I wonder how that pays. Do you get a salary for each of those, or is it? He could be making some pretty good money if he's getting 4 paychecks for being in the lead role of those 4 different positions. Interesting. Now, Stephen Collinson, do we have time for this? No, I want to talk more about Rubio in this scenario. We are going to talk about New York State issues probably in the next hour, some major local issues as well as statewide issues. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Don't forget, in the next hour, we will be talking with Jen Mullen. She is running for Steuben County Legislature. It is a primary scenario. She is in the district that is Town of Corning, Hornby, and Caton. So she'll be joining us in the 7 o'clock hour. Get your Derby picks in. And if you missed Kyle Petty on the program yesterday, that is posted on our YouTube page. It is also on our website, wydctv.com. Got a great reaction about our interview with Kyle Petty and that amazing event that is coming up next week right here at the Radisson and Corning. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are back broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. Let's go to some comments from viewers. Thank you, Bob. Needed a laugh today. There you go, Bob. You got a fan out there? No, we all like the climate change, or Climate Fact Friday, excuse me. We don't all like climate change before people edit that. Okay, a comment from a different viewer. Mark writes, I think Marco Rubio should run for president. I think he is more than fit for the job. Marco Rubio's doing a great job. I mean, 4 roles at once. It's going to be interesting. Stephen Conson actually suggested that the toughest task for Rubio is keeping his job. And we'll talk about that in a second. Mark also writes, and thank you for sending this in, Mark. I did not realize this. My Derby pick is Toby Keith's horse, number 15, Render Justice. I did not realize that, Mark. So I looked it up to find out a little bit more. Number 15 is indeed Render Judgment. The trainer is Kenny McPeak. The jockey is Sheldon Russell. He's the horse, as of this morning on the morning line, 30-1. According to an Instagram post on Toby Keith's page, because it is his horse, Toby Keith passing away not long ago, it says on his Instagram page, it was Toby's dream. Render Judgment is going to the Kentucky Derby. He worked so hard to finally have one there. Toby will have the best seat in the house to watch. I thought that was a nice tribute. So I'm glad you told me that. I will make a note of that, because that definitely, you can see the headlines there being made, especially if Render Justice is victorious on Saturday. So your picks for the Derby, your hot tips. Okay, finally, Ken writes in, Stephen Miller is the most passionate, common sense advocate for the president's agenda that Trump could possibly have. But America only sees his beatdowns of the legacy media on Fox stations. My wife does have one comment about him. She wonders how women hold him up as a sex symbol. Thank you, Ken. Yeah, you're right. That is the unfortunate part of Stephen Miller. He's articulate. He does such a great job breaking down the hypocrisy of the media, breaking down the topic of the day. Is very impressive to watch. The problem is you're most likely seeing it on Fox or as some conservative outlet. The media is not going to report on them getting a beating, which is exactly what he does. So that is unfortunate, but I would tend to agree with you, Ken. I don't know if you could have a more passionate, common sense advocate for Trump's agenda, one that just so often puts it so succinctly. It's just very, very impressive, a very intelligent man. So Rubio's hardest task in his tough new role may be keeping his job, says Stephen Conson. The president's ouster of National Security Advisor Mike Waltz and his decision to hand Waltz's White House portfolio to Marco Rubio comes at a fraught moment in international relations. The trade war that Trump ignited with China is beginning to damage the economy with no easy way out. The administration's drive to forge peace in Ukraine is yet to bear fruit. Kind of downplaying, though, that huge mineral rights deal. But an American soft power has been hamstrung by Trump's attacks on allies and his throttling of U.S. aid. But Rubio's most exacting challenge will be at home. And even if he does a great job, it's unlikely he'll be able to impose much coherence on U.S. foreign policy. That's because the most and perhaps only important influence on the America's globe role is Trump himself. The president is unpredictable, volatile, and determined to pursue policies that subvert the principles of U.S. global leadership that have been ingrained since World War II. He cozies up to authoritarians, threatens to annex territory of NATO allies, and treats foreign policy more as a giant real estate deal than statecraft. That's one reason why his envoy, Steve Witkoff, a real estate mogul, is handling talks on Ukraine, the Middle East, and Iran, a role that has already raised questions about Rubio's influence over foreign policy. Anyway, enough of that. Any decision that is made, anything that Trump does, we know Stephen Conson is going to have a negative opinion on it. That comes as no surprise. But we'll see how that plays out, that the toughest part of Rubio's new job is keeping his job. Seems like a stretch. According to J.D. Vance, he said that Trump removed Mike Waltz as National Security Advisor because the Floridian would be a better UN ambassador and that he should consider it a promotion. He was on special report with Brett Baer last night, and he said, we brought Mike on to do some serious reforms of the National Security Council. He has done that. I like Mike. I think he's a great guy. He's got the trust of both me and the president. But we also thought that he'd make a better UN ambassador as we get beyond the stage of the reforms that we've made to the National Security Council. Council. Vance said that both he and Trump like Mike, but they also thought that he'd make a better UN ambassador. I think you can make a good argument that it's a promotion. I think the media wants to frame this as a firing, said Vance. Donald Trump has fired a lot of people. He doesn't give them Senate-confirmed appointments afterwards. What he thinks is that Mike Waltz is going to better serve the administration, most importantly, the American people, in that role. Those close to the White House were shocked to hear Trump's decision to shuffle the team, as many didn't see Walz losing his old job, let alone being picked as UN envoy. Originally, of course, Elise Stefanik was tapped for that role, and we know how that went. Waltz is the first White House figure removed from the second Trump administration, lasting just 102 days as National Security Advisor. Again, Vance reiterating that it was not because of the Signal app. If we go back to when those messages were leaked, what we were doing is having a private, strategic conversation about how to message this to the American people. It's always important to explain what you're actually doing, how to ensure that some of the, frankly, our allied countries that are underspending on their own defense are actually carrying some of the burden. That was a concern that I raised about this particular operation, but I wasn't overruled. So he denied that it had anything to do with Signalgate and that this is a promotion. We had Rick earlier leave a comment that he believes Pete Hegseth is next. Your thoughts on that? We're going to move along here, though. Reading your comments. Keep those comments coming in, those derby picks coming in. Thanks again, Mark, for letting me know that. I'm glad to know. I think there'll be a lot of people in this audience that are glad to know that Toby Keith, the late Toby Keith, owned number 15, Render Justice, and that this was his dream to have a horse in the Kentucky Derby. So that'll be something very special to watch for. Thank you. Let's take a short break. Wrapping up hour number 1. Stay with us. As always, we thank our good friends at Boss Security and Horseheads for bringing us that picturesque view of Marcus Street in Corning. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back as we wrap up hour number 1. Let's go to viewer comments. If you go back to history, Henry Kissinger did the same thing Marco is doing for President Nixon. That's a very good point. Now, a comment from a different viewer. Now we're getting into some serious handicapping. Good morning, Frank. Well, good morning. Journalism, that meaning the horse, and the Derby, is in the number 8 post position, which historically is one of the top Derby winning posts, which will be tough to beat. But Beza, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, came in second to him in the Santa Anita Derby. Beza is also getting a jockey upgrade for the Derby with the Eclipse Award-winning jockey Flavian Pratt. I'm not crazy about his 21st post position, though. Well, thank you. Beza, one to keep, well, at least keep our eye on, maybe put in, how do they always say it on, when I was watching it so regularly during COVID, we'll put those in exotics. So thank you very much. Okay. Keep those Derby picks coming in. One last story before we wrap up hour number 1. Over 80 Harvard faculty members, are going to donate portions of their salaries in the, quote, resistance against President Donald Trump. According to the Harvard Crimson, more than 80 faculty have said they will give the portion of their pay for up to a year to support the resistance. Quote, if we as a faculty are asking the university administration to resist the Trump administration's attack on academic freedom, we should also be willing to share in the financial sacrifice that will be necessary, said Harvard Kennedy School professor Danny Roderick, class of 79. The pledge donation came as Harvard faces lean times and continuing attacks on its funding. Lean times. They have a $53 billion endowment. Lean times. Get out of here. The Trump administration froze $2.2 billion in federal funding on April 15th, as well as an additional $1 billion on April 21st after Harvard publicly rejected the White House sweeping demands for policy changes at the university. Now, to me, it seems kind of like window dressing. Probably there's no numbers. They haven't given us any numbers. We'll put it that way. We got to take a break. Keep those comments coming in. We always have fun on the Friday edition of Frankly Speaking, but let's face it, we have fun every morning. Stay with us. We'll be right back with hour number 2. Here we are, hour number 2 of Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I am your host, Frank Acom, and I'm thanking you personally for joining us this morning as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio. We have some viewer comments. Hegseth is solid. He will always be a lightning rod because he is between Trump and the neocons. Thank you for that comment. Comment from a different viewer. Good morning, Frank. Well, good morning. There was so much negative news surrounding the Signal chat incident involving Mike Walls and his ouster. Very negative news and clickbait garbage, but I'll admit I'm confused how exactly that happened and his new role. I'll be honest, and I think I made this relatively clear on the program. Having Jeffrey Goldberg, of all people, be on that Signal chat really, really concerned me. Would I have been as concerned if it happened to be some local reporter or happened to be, some distant cousin that happened to be in his contact? No, I wouldn't have been. But when it is arguably one of the biggest anti-Trump reporters who writes for The Atlantic happens to get on that Signal app, and it's because of someone in Mike Wall's team, I would say some would argue that this is a long time coming. Some had thought that he would be fired right away. There were anonymous sources at the time. And remember, he's not fired. He's just going to UN ambassador. But some sources had said at the time that Trump, that really raised some concerns for Trump, that why did Waltz even have Goldberg's number? Now, keep in mind, this is coming after 4 years in Trump's original term where so many leaks and sources were going to people like Goldberg and telling lies, trying to discredit the president, trying to stop his agenda. So I personally, and you can argue with me, you can disagree with me, I don't think this is a bad thing. I think this is a beneficial thing overall for the president and his agenda. Let's talk about New York State issues for just a moment. I don't have too much there, but then we'll get back into, I have some updates on the Democrat Party, where they're at this morning. We also have more on the Trump administration. And if you are just joining us, Trump last night terminated NPR and PBS federal funding in an executive order late yesterday. Okay, as Hochul continues her state budget victory lap, lawmakers passed yet another extender. So we are well over the 1 month deadline of April 1st. On the 10th time this year, the New York State Senate meant to pass a budget extender. State Senator Liz Krueger, typically tasked with explaining why the Senate is not ready to vote on budget bills, decided to try something new. I asked everyone if they got Monty Python references, and they said yes. Now, Republican State Senator Tom O'Mara, ranking member of the Finance Committee, set the stage as he questioned Krueger on why budget bills weren't yet before the Senate. Our Senator, Tom O'Mara. Krueger replied, "In the Holy Grail, there's a scene involving the Black Plague in Europe. They're pushing around barrels and yelling, 'Bring out your dead, bring out your dead.' And suddenly a body is thrown in, and you hear the voice say, 'Not quite dead yet.'" Even O'Mara could be heard laughing over an open microphone. "I'm so glad everyone appreciated that," said Krueger, "because I really thought hard about saying it. It's not quite done yet, despite some people's linguistic interpretation that it is done. It's not quite done yet." The governor, so what this is in reference to, it's a long way around there. But again, glad Tom O'Mara, friend of Frankly Speaking, making that article. She, meaning Governor Hochul, can say that it's done as much as she wants. That does not make it done. Assemblyman Sempolinski had that great statement that we read on the air yesterday, saying that this is putting the cart before the horse, that the budget deal's not done. As a matter of fact, I've seen numbers to about 95% done, according to Andrea Stewart Cousins. But yet, Governor Hochul is running around the state saying how great this is for everybody, that she got this all done. But headline after headline, budget plan for Buffalo schools remains in mystery as Hochul takes victory lap. So you have the city of Buffalo, you have the school districts, all depending on knowing about funding, and and no one knows because the budget hasn't been passed in over a month, and yet Hochul is out taking a victory lap. So there is kind of your update on, I know there's not much, but on the New York State budget, you would have thought on, what was it, maybe Tuesday, that it was all done. It was all over. The budget was passed. We're all counting down the days until we can spend our huge inflation rebate check of roughly $200. Thinking, daydreaming throughout the day, what you're going to do, what kind of trips you'll take, what kind of expensive purchases you'll take with your inflation rebate check of $200. So you would think it was all over. And yet here we are. It's about 95% done, is what is being reported. And yet all of this being delayed. I know a lot of school districts upset, a lot of cities upset because Governor Hochul is taking a victory lap while the budget has yet to be passed. And again, another extender passed yesterday. So well over the 1 month past the deadline is where we're at this morning. Okay, we're going to get on the local front here in just a moment. How am I doing? Good. This is good news. Congressman Nick Langworthy released a statement yesterday about the passage of H.J. Resolution 88. I know what you're saying. Well, what's that? Great question. So Congressman Nick Langworthy had this to say, quote, "I'm very pleased that H.J. Resolution 88 passed the House today, reversing the EPA's decision to allow California to ban the sale of gas-powered vehicles by 2035. This push to force Americans into electric vehicles is nonsensical and dangerous. Forcing our dealerships to shoulder this burden would have had dire consequences. Back in February, I led a bipartisan letter to Governor Hochul urging her to reconsider New York's EV sales mandate, which was directly adopted from California's environmental extremists in power. This mandate would have left dealerships with large inventories of unsold EVs, potentially leading to layoffs and other negative economic consequences for thousands of workers employed in New York's automotive industry. This legislation's passage in the House is a huge win for our auto industry consumers, dealerships, and workers. Now the Senate must pass it immediately so President Trump can sign it into law as soon as possible." So this bill, H.J. Resolution 88, effectively killing New York State's radical Green New Deal electric vehicle mandate, a topic that we talk about so much on this program. I'm glad Congressman Nick Langworthy brought that to our attention. We thank him. And now we hope that the Senate moves quickly, passes that, and it gets to the president's desk. Now let's go local, and then we're going to get back into the federal level. Receiving this from our friends in Hornell. We talk about Hornell. We have the mayor, John Buckley, on frequently. So out of the Hornell Sun, which is a online, would you call it publication if it's online? Online newspaper, essentially. They had this article. We have read some articles in the past from the Hornell Sun. They do a great job. Well, this is from the Hornell Republican Committee as published on the Hornell Sun. The Hornell Republican Committee is proud to announce its full slate of incumbent candidates running for re-election to lead the city of Hornell forward. Under the experienced and dedicated leadership of Mayor John Buckley and the Common Council, Hornell has seen steady growth, prudent financial stewardship, and meaningful investment in quality of life for all residents. The results speak for themselves, said Hornell GOP Chairman Paul Van Cassel. Mayor Buckley and our entire team of aldermen and alderwomen have worked tirelessly to keep taxes low, revitalize our neighborhoods, upgrade critical infrastructure, and ensure our city remains a safe, welcoming place to live and raise a family. We are proud to put this strong, united slate of proven leaders back on the ballot. So the 2025 slate of Republican incumbents for our friends watching in Hornell: Mayor John Buckley, 1st Ward Alderman Dave Sutphin, great guy, 2nd Ward Alderman Christina Hancock, 3rd Ward Alderman Joe McKay, 4th Ward Alderman Steve Peck, 5th Ward Alderman Dan Warner, who is also running for county legislature, 6th Ward Alderman Lita Brown, 7th Ward Alderman Kevin Valentine, 8th James Bassage, Bassage, 9th Ward, Shannon Davis. In addition to the work on the Common Council, Alderman Dan Warner is also stepping up to run for county legislator, aiming to strengthen Hornell's voice with county-level decision-making. Chairman Van Cassel praised the team's record on several key fronts. Quote, in recent years, we've seen major investments in our city parks, improved roads and infrastructure, and strong support for public safety, especially our dedicated Hornell Police Department. Our leadership team has never wavered in its commitment to smart governance and community-first values. As the 2025 election season begins, the Hornell GOP looks forward to continuing the conversation with residents about the city's future. From the east end to the west, from every ward across the city, this team has delivered, said Van Cassel. We're proud of what we've accomplished, and we're excited about what's ahead. So that's for our friends in Hornell. Now, well, you know, I want to read this too. This is another local issue coming from our friend Michael Volino. He has been on the program in the past. He is going to be on the program in the near future. This is from the town of Thurston, and they proposed a resolution, and it passed 3 days ago. I want to read that to you because I think it's an important one, and maybe signaling to other communities they may want to do the same. So we're going to read that here when we come back. Run just a little late. Keep those comments, keep those waves coming in. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Thank you to Boss Security in Horseheads for bringing us the Frankly Speaking Roof Cam. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. Coming up in just a moment as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio, we're going to be talking with Jen Mullen. She is running for Steuben County Legislator, and that is the district. There is a primary challenge. That is the district of the town of Corning, Hornby, and Canton. So if you are in those areas, call your neighbors, call your friends, and tell them to tune in. And that is during the Steuben County Office for the Aging segment of our program. That's coming up in the next break. All right, comment from Ken. Ken raises a very good point. The burning question I have is, why would Mike Waltz have Jeff Goldberg's contact information in a secure chat app? I don't know much about Mr. Waltz, but it makes me think that he has had private conversations with Goldberg, a clear anti-Trump hack, in the past. I agree, Ken. I've got to say, and I'm not trying to pile on to Mike Waltz. He's going to make a good UN ambassador, I'm sure. Ambassador to the UN. But that, it's not as if it was just somebody off the street that they got a number wrong. And they go, why am I part of this Signal app? You know, I work for the county or something. No, it was Jeff Goldberg, a clear Jeffrey Goldberg. I think he's one of those guys that wants his full name read. Jeffrey Goldberg, a clear anti-Trump hack, to use Ken's term. I agree. So that was always a major concern. I would not have had a problem, and I think I could have easily defended on this program, having him fired because of that. But Trump did not. Interesting. I was more aggressive in wanting to a firing than the man known for firing. And this is not to knock Mike Waltz. Accidents can happen. I understand that. But of all people in the world, Jeffrey Goldberg, that really, really concerned me, especially coming off of the first 4 years of the Trump administration. We saw the leaks. We saw the attacks. And anonymous sources at the time, for whatever it's worth, anonymous sources saying that was Trump's biggest issue with it, too. Why did he even have his number? So, yes, I would agree with you, Ken. All right, I want to mention this before we go to break, and then we're gonna hear from Jen Mullen. So our friend Michael Volino, who is running for legislature as well, we've had him on the program in the past. He's from Thurston. We're going to be talking with him a little bit later on, I think this month. Michael Volino said the Steuben County Board of Legislature is appealing a New York State Supreme Court decision that did not allow them to remove insurance protections from the county sheriff, Jim Allard's position. The county has spent a large amount of taxpayers' money appealing this decision, which appears to be due to personal animosity, according to a newspaper article. The board, the Thurston Town Board, the board agreed to pass Resolution 11 of 2025 in support of Sheriff Allard as follows. Now, bear with me, there's a lot of whereases. But whereas Sheriff James Allard is duly elected first elected in 2016, and whereas New York State Supreme Court Justice Jason Cook ruled in November 2024, and the Steuben County Legislature's removal of the sheriff's identification through local law was unlawfully enacted and invalid. And whereas Steuben County has spent nearly $200,000 on legal representation and media consultants since 2023, and whereas the sheriff has the constitutional right to free speech under the First Amendment to criticize legislators as he sees fit, and whereas the divisions between the sheriff and county legislature can be handled through open dialogue and communication instead of legal action. And now, therefore, be it resolved, the Thurston Town Board views it in the best interest of Thurston and county taxpayers that the legislature does not appeal New York State Supreme Court Justice Jason Cook's decision invalidating a local law removing insurance protections for Sheriff Jim Allard and fully reinstate the sheriff's identification. Be it further resolved, copies of the resolution will be sent to Sheriff James Allard and Steuben County Legislative Chairperson Kelly Fitzpatrick and District 9 Legislator Wendy Lozo to be read at next regular meeting of the County Legislature on April 28, 2025 at 10 p.m. So thank you for sending that along, and we're glad to hear that, making the decision that the people of the town of Thurston do not believe that is in their best interest as taxpayers to appeal that court decision. Okay, we have to take a break. When we come back, the breaking story, I'm not going to bring it up again unless you want to talk about it, but the breaking news this morning, Trump has terminated NPR and PBS's federal funding with a sweeping executive order. That happened late last night. This is something that conservatives have been calling for a long time. Taxpayer funding to be cut from organizations that don't even hide their bias. Even, I think, most people in the Democrat Party or on the left would admit there is a bias, and that's why they enjoy NPR, and that's why they enjoy PBS, which is fine. But taxpayer funding should not be going to these bias organizations. We've got a couple other maybe media updates, but I do want to get to the Democrat Party because the long knives are coming out for people like Chuck Schumer. We'll tell you some of the fresh faces coming up through the ranks. But next, Jen Mullen running for Steuben County Legislator, and that is the district of the town of Corning, Hornby, and Canyon. That's coming up next. So stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. We will be right back. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. Welcome to the Steuben County Office for the Aging segment of Frankly Speaking. Steuben County Office for the Aging, committed to maximizing quality of life, safety, and independence. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We are broadcasting from the Hesselson studio, and full disclaimer, you're going to hear a little hum in the background. Across the street, they're doing a little carpet cleaning. But joining me in the studio this morning, Jenniffer Mullen. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you for having me back.
Well, this time you're running for Steuben County Legislature, and everybody can see at the bottom of the screen, that's District 13, and that's Caton, Corningtown, and Hornby. Tell us a little bit about your background and why you decided to run for legislature.
My background is really focused in community service. I've been a nurse for 17 years, and I started on the town council. We implemented a bunch of transparency, websites, social media, and I had the opportunity last year to step in as supervisor and seeing the growth potential, seeing what we can do for more residents, Caton, Hornby, town of Corning, outside of where we're at is such an opportunity, and I wanted to step in. As Carol Ferratella is stepping down, it left a wonderful opportunity to step in.
Well, and you started on the town council, then you go to supervisor, and quickly now you're running for legislature. That's fast. That's a fast turnaround. How do you think the time as on the council and as supervisor is going to help you if you are lucky enough to become a legislator?
If I am blessed enough and lucky enough to become a legislator, all of that has been wonderful experience. The council I served on for approximately 6 years.
Has it been that long?
It really has, and it's flown by.
Yeah. Wow.
And I know. And the opportunities that gave of, getting the website started, meeting with people, learning what residents really want, learning how to knock on doors. When I started, I was terrified.
Right.
And now people are calling left and right with, this is what we need. So all of that experience is built up into supervisor, where we've really been able to get great community projects, really have a nice stable budget, and all of that has helped me grow into what I hope will be a successful legislator run.
It's funny, I guess now when I say quick turnaround, it wasn't quick. I can't believe it's been 6 years. But you mentioned the transparency issue, and that's something that we may talk about here with the county in just a moment. But it's kind of interesting. So many people I have that are running for town council or city council, the biggest thing for them is, how do you spread the word? How do you get the information out? Because people just don't attend the meetings anymore.
Absolutely. And coming to the meetings, Monday mornings, it's hard. It's hard for some people. I keep a very open, continuous Facebook page, Instagram.
Sure.
But some of my older residents, and I'm not picking on older people,
No,
they
of course
don't
not.
have it. So I try and leave my cell phone, my email, and allow people to call me, text me, email me, and I try for a fast turnaround to get back to them.
And we're talking about the run for Steuben County Legislator now. What was it that sparked your interest when you said, you know what, I'm going to make that leap?
When I found out Carol Ferratello was stepping down, it just seemed like a natural fit of how can we do more community service? How can we better our community? And I want to really grow on what we have. So I slept on it, stewed on it. And Stuart Samus called me the next morning and said, hey, what are you doing for the next 4 years? So it got the idea churning, and I can't see a better fit as I've stepped down from teaching full-time, and that opened up about 40 to 60 hours. So I've really tried to put that into the town, into the community, and hopefully into growth with the legislator.
One of the things we talk about a lot on this program, because it is a kind of a tedious process, is the petition season.
Absolutely.
So you obviously had to go through the petition season. It seems like it just ended, and now you've got to run, and then the election's right around the corner, or the primary's right around the corner. What did you hear when you were knocking on doors? What were the major concerns?
Finances, and there was also the discussions with Sheriff Allard and what is going on at the legislator, and transparency, communication. The same issue you just discussed is, how are you going to let us know what's going on? How do we reach out to you? How do we talk to you?
Right.
And why you? Those were big topics. It would take me sometimes 30, 45 minutes hearing people, and that's amazing. It's amazing because I've been to doors. People don't want to talk. They'll sign and want to send you on your way.
If you're lucky. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And now people really want to hear what's going on, what our thoughts are, and how amazing is that? They're really coming to the political table of, this isn't okay, or this is what we want.
And I do want to talk about the sheriff in a moment, but you mentioned kind of that transparency in Corning. I think it's interesting because this is no secret. The county was kind of slapped on the wrist a little bit about their lack of transparency in a lot of closed door sessions, executive sessions. Will that be a major concern for you if you win, to take a look at that and see why that has been the case?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We can't have closed doors. People need to know what's going on. People need to be engaged. And I shouldn't say need to be, but we need to offer that to them. If they want to get involved, I can't encourage that enough.
Right.
Come to, the meetings. Come and let people know what your thoughts are. Because we're representatives. We're supposed to be there representing our population.
Absolutely.
So to know that people are getting involved and saying, we want to know more, and you need to be more transparent, that is amazing, and that should continue.
Now, I think for me, my experience of taking out petitions this season for other candidates, I'm not running for anything, but the biggest issue I heard, and I would like to hear your opinion on it, is the situation with the sheriff at the county, because that, I think, at the end of the day, is the conversation people are having when it comes to the legislature. So what is your thoughts on what all unfolded?
I think exactly what you just said, the transparency. If there was an issue, people didn't really know what it was.
Right.
They backed themselves in a corner, and now, Sheriff Allard has a very solid argument of, this should be paid for. His insurance should be paid for. I don't see why it shouldn't be. They lost the appeal. It's time to let it go. Taking more tax dollars, and putting it into a continued fight, it doesn't help. It doesn't bring any community together. It doesn't heal any wounds. And sometimes we just need to move on.
Right. And we have on this program people that comment, people that comment that aren't even from Steuben County, but I think one of the issues that they kept bringing up time and time again is the sheriff is elected. So
Absolutely.
why are we going after an elected official? Isn't that really up to the voters, right, at the end of the day? So it's been kind of an interesting thing to watch, and I guess in a weird way encouraging to see how many people have been following it at a time when it's tough to get all the local news.
Absolutely.
So that's why I came up so much with petitions. Okay, what issues do you see moving forward if you are a legislator? What would you like to focus on other than the transparency we keep talking about?
You know, transparency is huge, but what can we do to bring more resources down to our area for Corning, for Caton, for Hornby? We have a huge financial revenue that we're sitting on with the county. How can we better use those funds? Emergency services, healthcare management. What can we do better in our area? We are very rural. And with a background as a nurse, I worry about residents who have 20, 30 minutes before an ambulance comes to them. How can we improve? How can we do better for our local residents in our own local community?
Now, we're talking about petition season, and now it's campaign season. Kind of a shorter time frame. I mean, when you figure everything is official on the ballot to when you actually go vote for primary, it's quick. So how are you going to handle the campaign? How are you going to run your campaign?
I'm going to run my campaign the same way I always have, knocking on doors, talking to people, trying to get my information out there, sending mailers so people know how to contact me. I have an active Facebook page. My cell phone is up. My emails are up, trying to get the word out. I have amazing friends who have been making phone calls, knocking on doors for me. I'm extremely, extremely blessed. So trying to use that and continuing to move forward and reaching as many people as I can.
At the end of the day, it really is just knocking on doors, isn't it?
It really is. It really is.
But it's fun. It's like we were saying with the petition process. It's so interesting to see what people are concerned in, that maybe it's an issue that you weren't even aware of at the county level, and that's their number one concern. It gives you an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to do what's best for the constituents.
Absolutely. And people have been so open. I've had a few people that, don't open the doors and, that I expect. But the people who have, I can't tell you the amount of support I've had moving forward, and that is it just makes my heart happy. It reminds me of why I'm here.
And we're talking about the Republican primary, so it is coming up very, very quickly. A couple last minute kind of who, what, when, where, and whys. So your goals moving forward, we talked about the issues you see that you'll be facing. What is your goal if you win and after 4 years you look back? What would you have hoped to accomplish?
Better services to our local residents. And bringing people together.
Yeah.
Right now, with the sheriff argument, there's a lot of divide. How can we bring people together and bring growth?
Where can people find out more about you, or if they want to help your campaign? What's the best way to go at that?
I am on Facebook, very active on Facebook. Jenniffer Mullen for Steuben County Legislator. Okay. You can find me at Jen4Legislator at gmail.com. You can see me driving all around.
Well, we see that in the background.
Right.
I think we'll know it's you when you drive by. Before we go, the final question that we always ask, what would you say to Republican voters before they head into the booth on primary day?
Vote for the best person. I can't say that enough. My record speaks for itself. We've done amazing things with our budget, saving over $100,000 in the first year, putting up parks, playgrounds, community activities. Vote for the person who's going to do the work, and I will absolutely work hard.
Great. I'm sure we'll talk again before primary, but thanks for giving us so much time this morning.
Thank you so much for letting me be on your show.
All right. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking. Stay with us. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are back broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. Thanks again to Jen Mullen. We received some comments from viewers. I should have prefaced this. We're going to have there's a lot of primaries going on, and many of them in reference to what we brought up earlier on the program with what's happening at the county with the sheriff, right? So there's a lot of primaries, and the first interview that I'm having with each of the candidates that have asked to be on the show is kind of a meet the candidate. So they're very often pre-recorded because there's nothing time sensitive about it. So I apologize. I normally like to do the disclaimer that it's pre-recorded. I think I forgot during this interview, but we did pre-record because it's a meet the candidate. The first one is a meet the candidate. Then we'll have some live ones, some other pre-taped ones, but I'm trying to get somewhere 2 to 3 opportunities to hear from the candidate before you go into the primary booth, because it is a big election. For instance, in Irwin, we're going to have a week that's almost full of just Irwin candidates for legislature because there's 3 running there. In this instance, there is two. We will have Jen's opponent on later this month. I think actually next week, as a matter of fact. So I thank her for being on the program. But a viewer asked a question, and I understand. I saw that you wanted me to scratch it, but it's a great question. It wasn't live, but your question has a lot of validity. And it was, I have land in Hornby and in Caton, and I vote in Chemung County. Can I vote in Steuben County also, as I have land there and pay taxes there? Unfortunately, no. The answer to that is no. And I understand your frustration. This is a lot of people's frustration, especially those who own maybe land for recreation, for hunting, things like that. You're paying the school taxes, you're paying the land taxes, and you have no say in the local government or in the school board or anything like that. It is a frustration. I don't have an answer for you if it would be better or worse if they changed that. But no, the short answer is no, you cannot vote in Steuben County, even though you do pay taxes here. But if you live in Chemung and you're registered to vote in Chemung, that is where you would vote. So that's a great question. That's why I didn't scratch it, because a lot of people have issues with that, especially myself, having some hunting land, looking at the taxes and looking at all the exorbitant fees you're paying and realizing you have no say in that school budget, no say in the local government, can be very frustrating. Comment from a different viewer. Yes, sheriff's insurance should be paid for by the county. Came back and bite the county in the, we'll say, butt. Thanks for misuse of our tax money, referencing the legislature. Where is the lawyer for Steuben County now? She's gone, thank God. Well, thank you for that comment. And then someone telling Jen Mullen that she had a nice Jeep. Yes, strategically placed Jeep in the studio window that just happened to have her sign on that said to vote for her. Okay, comment from Ken. Ken writes in, did you watch the Musk Doge Jesse Waters Part 1 interview last night? I have not yet. I've seen recaps and some clips from it. One of the Doge patriots talked about the Treasury. He said that the Treasury did not ask for receipts for money being drawn from it, and the Treasury typically distributes about $5 trillion a year. So Doge put a mandate in place that required anyone asking to draw down money from the Treasury must first upload a receipt. He said the drawdowns of money stopped. The obvious conclusion is the Treasury was being used as elected and unelected officials' personal piggy bank. The DOJ should investigate and prosecute any wrongdoers to the fullest extent of the law. Thank you, Ken. Yeah, it's a little past my bedtime, so I have not had the opportunity to see all of the interview. I can't wait. We learned a lot in that, and I find the workings of Doge fascinating, and how they handled it. Elon Musk saying, as he reflected on 100 days of Doge, he talked about it being a long-term enterprise, because if we take our eye off the ball, the waste and fraud will come roaring back. They also credit the federal workers for helping to trim the waste fraud. Quote, there is conflict, but that is the exception. So if you watched that last night, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. We'd like to just give a big thank you to all the government employees who are helping reduce the waste and fraud, because we really couldn't do it without you, he said. I'm not trying to sort of say all government employees are bad. That's absolutely not the case. It's just that there actually just does need to be a serious effort to reduce the waste and fraud, and we're just making that happen. There is conflict, but that is the exception. That's actually true of history in general. There's people study the wars a lot, but actually most of the time there wasn't a war. It's just not as exciting. I mean, any given company, any given organization name is going to kind of be the opposite of the title. So we'll be watching that later, but if you happen to see it, I'd love to hear your opinion. All right, let's talk about the Democrat Party for just a moment, shall we? Jen Psaki mocked Chuck Schumer during an appearance on The Late Show. Remember, the long knives are out for Chuck Schumer. His approval rating is at 17%. Stephen Colbert joked with her, saying, but Chuck Schumer, he wrote a very strongly worded letter. Psaki said, with 8 strongly worded questions. Colbert weighing in, what more could you ask for from a leader? That's when Psaki piled on, saying, if that's not going to make you shake in your boots, I don't know what is. She argued that Democrat lawmakers need to be more aggressive in their approach to the GOP. Go ahead. Go lead a protest. Go to a red state. Go hold a town hall. Go to El Salvador. Whatever it may be. People want to know you're fighting and doing things. If Democrats are going to rely on the tactics of old, they will lose. And so hopefully more people come on to the fighting side. Then she nodded to J.B. Pritzker, who called for mass protests. It was incredibly powerful, incredibly strong, Psaki said. The message he was sending was, I'm a fighter. I'm going to say the things. I'm going to call out do nothing Democrats. So they want you to, it doesn't really need anything of substance, like going to El Salvador or Cory Booker's 25-hour speech. It just needs to look like you're doing something. And that's a common trend, which is, and it actually happened with David Hogg clashing with James Carville, accusing Carville of being the kind of the old way, the non-winning way for Democrats. Now, I don't know what you think about this. If you're Republican, you probably like the idea. David Hogg is talking about spending millions of dollars to run Democrats against fellow Democrats, to primary fellow Democrats. Now, Carville's argument is, what a waste of money. We need to be focused on beating Republicans, not solid Democrat districts. So David Hogg said, Carville believes in the politics of being timid, of hiding. I believe in fighting, and that is what people want to see right now from the Democrat Party. So they had a meeting and a back and forth on this. Carville yelling at Hogg at one point, saying there's no nuance to it. It's just flat out wrong. That's money that could be used to beat Republicans, to beat Democrats. Here, and Hogg said, what is your plan to deal with our abominable approval rating? Carville shouted, win elections, you see, against Republicans. You want my strategy? It's to win elections. It's not to win an election in Queens, which you don't ever run against a Republican. It's to help Democrats win elections. So there's this new fresh face. There's been article after article of the Democrat Party, the kind of the AOCs, where they want younger people. They want the Carvilles. They want the Schumers gone. They want the more AOC aggressive type Democrat, and so much so that David Hogg calling for spending millions, and he's in charge, or he's got a leadership position in the DNC, calling for money to be spent with Democrats, younger Democrats, primarying older Democrats. But back to Chuck Schumer, they want him out. Many in the Democrat Party want him out of leadership. His approval rating just 17%. What's interesting, on Tuesday, Chuck Schumer said Trump, he was highlighting this, he was touting this. Trump has the lowest 100-day approval rating since they started polling. He was touting this to use it as an attack on Trump. Fast forward to a few minutes later, when he was asked about his own approval rating of just 17%, he said, polls come and go. Now, Phil Mickelson, the great golfer, the legend, called Chuck Schumer a traitor for opposing the election reforms proposed in the SAFE Act. Mickelson blasted Schumer for leading the opposition to the bill that the New York Democrats called the antithesis of democracy. This is what he said. This is what Schumer said. Donald Trump and Republicans are putting our elections in a vice grip. Executive orders from the president on one end and dangerous legislation from Congress on the other. They don't understand the sacredness of elections and keeping them fair. This kind of legislation, the kind of executive orders which are so jaundiced, so slanted on the side of one party, are the antithesis of democracy. He also called the bill dangerous and reminiscent of Jim Crow. Get all the talking points in there. Mickelson said, so how is this fighting for Americans? How is letting non-citizens vote in American elections a good thing? It is not. He is not representing America, its citizens, nor their best interests. He is a traitor. Those who live in California are acutely aware of how many non-citizens vote and undermine the system and our country, calling Chuck Schumer a traitor. We got to take a short break. Going to read your comments. There's another couple quick pieces on the Democrats. Then we're going to try to get through some quick stories on Trump. Stay with us. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security and Horsesteads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. A lot of comments coming in. We'll get to those in the last segment, so keep them coming in because we have one more segment. We got to take a break here shortly, but here's a couple comments from viewers that I was able to get to during break. The Democrats are going to try to be more Trump-like, if you will, but it falls so far short because it's so phony and inauthentic. It's pathetic. Thank you very much for that comment, and that's in reference to people like J.B. Pritzker, Psaki, and even David Hogg and what they've been saying. Comment from a different viewer. The Derby horses from Japan make handicapping even more difficult than it already is. One of these days, they'll get a win. They take horse racing pretty seriously. But win or lose, it's Derby Day. And Kamala Harris isn't our president. A great Derby Day indeed. Thank you, viewer. CNN's data guru, Harry Enton, had kind of a wake-up call for Democrats, because we know the media and the Democrat Party have been touting Trump's poll numbers, Chuck Schumer doing it, then moments later when confronted with his own poll numbers saying, well, polls come and go. But they've been trying to push this narrative that after 100 short days, Trump is now hated even after that landslide victory in November. But he said if Democrats think that at this particular point, just because Donald Trump is unpopular, that they're going to run away with it like a Heisman Trophy winner, that is not necessarily the case. These numbers should be a major wake-up moment for Democrats. When you match Donald Trump against his actual competition, Donald Trump comes out ahead. And that is why Democrats, in fact, cannot count their chickens just yet, because those eggs have not cracked at this particular moment. Now, according to CNN polling, 45% of registered voters believe Trump is doing a better job in the White House than Kamala Harris would have. This looks a heck of a lot like the election results, despite the fact that Trump's favorable ratings aren't too hot to trot. He said, the bottom line is when you look at Donald Trump in a vacuum, it's one thing. But when you actually match him up against folks in the real world, all of a sudden his numbers look considerably better. Now, AOC, we mentioned yesterday, she is considering running for that leadership position. Representative Jerry Conley was in charge of the Oversight Committee. Ranking member, I should say. He is stepping down because of health issues. Some are saying it's not in AOC's best interest because she's at a level of popularity right now. In her rallies, there's even talks in the New York Times throwing around number 1 Senate, running against Chuck Schumer, number 2 for president. So there's questions of whether or not, a few months ago, this seemed like a great idea. In today's climate, not sure if that's where she wants to be. Douglas Murray had the piece, because someone mentioned earlier about Kamala Harris's speech the other day. Drudge Report presenting it as it looks like she's very presidential, looks like she might give it another go, though many people believe she's going to run for governor of California. Douglas Murray, we don't have a chance to get to it, but Douglas Murray saying Kamala Harris reminds everyone why we didn't elect her president. The Democrats seem to be lost in the wilderness, but at least their former presidential candidate still has elephants for company, and that's in reference to what she said. I hope, so that is coming from Douglas Murray. We don't have time to get to it. Get your last minute comments in, your last minute predictions on the Derby. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security. Thank you, as always, to our friends at Boss Security. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are back broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Marcus Street in Corning. Let's go to some viewer comments. Ken writes, it would be a horrible plan to allow landowners to vote in the localities where they own land, but don't live on it. Can you imagine how many Dems would be buying up small plots of useless acreage just to get the right to vote for other Democrats? Oh, I agree, Ken. I guess I wasn't clear about that. It was more about the frustration that people have because they would like to make a difference as they pay those high taxes. But no, that would be so misused. There is a real reason. I don't have an answer for how you give people some say in their local governments, but no, I agree with you. It would be a nightmare, and it would lead to so much fraud and so much corruption. So I agree. I should have been clear on that. But I thought that was a very good question, because it's a frustration that many people have, and I hear it a lot, but I don't think there is an answer for it. Comment from a different viewer. No doubt Schumer has lots of enemies, even within his ranks. One of the results of operating with no moral compass. Thank you very much. Final comment. I thought the Jesse Musk interview was enlightening and ever informative. But on the light side, the boom man, the microphone man, who had to carry the boom mic, should have received hazardous duty pay. Yeah, I do not envy his position. Hey, by the way, 3 House Democrats have withdrawn their names from co-sponsoring the articles of impeachment against Trump. Representative Gerald Nadler, Representative Robin Kelly, and Representative Kwesi McPherson each dropped their support for Representative Sri Thandar's impeachment resolution, which was filed earlier this week, and we brought that story to you earlier in the week. Congressman McPherson removed himself as a co-sponsor because he was made aware it was not clear by Democrat leadership and not fully vetted legally, and he preferred to err on the side of caution. The Congresswoman was under the impression that the resolution was drafted and reviewed by both the House Judiciary Committee and leadership when she originally signed on during a vote series on the floor. Okay. Yesterday, during the National Day of Prayer, Trump said, "So as we bow our heads on this beautiful day, once again, we have to trust our God because our God knows exactly where we're going, what we're doing, knows every inch of our life, and may he continue to hear our prayers to guide our steps and build up our beloved nation to even greater heights." That was President Trump at National Day of Prayer ceremony at the White House yesterday, signing an executive order establishing the Religious Liberty Commission. We have to trust God, he said. He also was speaking in front of a class graduating in Alabama, saying, "You've done a lot of winning. Winning is a good thing to do. But today, I'm also asking you to look forward to something very, very bright and more promising." This is what he told the class of 2025 at the University of Alabama. And it's going to be an even more promising tomorrow. I promise you that. You're the first graduating class of the golden age of America. You're graduating at an exciting time for our nation, a period of both extraordinary change and incredible potential. He told the new graduates they will see unbelievable growth in the country very soon. You're going to be starting to see it very, very soon. The whole world is talking about it. By the way, the Army plans for a potential parade on Trump's birthday. We brought that story to you quite some time ago. Now calling for 6,600 soldiers and at least 150 vehicles, 50 helicopters, 7 bands, and possibly a couple thousand civilians. Now, this is a parade, and the AP is kind of misleading here. It is a parade, but it's not. It happens to be on Trump's birthday, but it's not for Trump's birthday. It's for the Army's anniversary, but just happens to coincide with Trump's 79th birthday on June the 14th. Okay. Moving along, we're almost out of time. Okay, this viewer disagreeing with Trump. Exciting time in our country. How about scary time? Okay. Speaking of time, we are out of time. Thank you to everyone who joined us this morning. What a great discussion. Thank you to Jen Mullen, who is running for Steuben County Legislature, for being on the program this morning. Good luck to everyone out there on your Derby bets. We'll see. We didn't really make too many predictions. We're excited to see how Toby Keith, the late Toby Keith's horse does. I'll never find myself in any position where I'm rooting for journalism, so I don't see the horse or the profession, so I don't see that happening. But we are out of time. Good luck on your Derby bets. We will see you bright and early Monday morning starting at 6 a.m. for Frankly Speaking, only on WYDC TV Big Fox. I look forward to it already. Have a great weekend, folks.